Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about brain-computer interfaces and specifically the advantages and possibilities of something akin to the Matrix. Now when it comes to the subject of transhumanism, if there's anything that we should fast track, objectively it should probably be radical life extension. After all, if you live long enough to do anything, then you're way less limited in what you can do. But from a subjective standpoint, I'd really like for brain-computer interfaces to be further advanced. Now, one advantage that I have is the fact that there are companies actively working on BCIs. Elon Musk's Neuralink is easily the most famous example, but even video game companies like Valve is teaming up with BCI companies in order to incorporate it into future designs of their VR headsets. And I think the greatest goal for BCIs is to be able to achieve a matrix. That being the stuff we see in the movies, the virtual environment that is, as I like to say, sensationally indistinguishable from reality, and the rapid, if not instant, accumulation of knowledge. Went through all that trouble, and the game just cucks me. Come on.
Alert. The control point is being captured.
Anyways,
Time has been added.
now concerning, the virtual environment, I think what we would start to see immediately are attempts at just making, new sorts of video games. There would be sort of action-adventure environments, there'd be sort of first-person shooter environments, there'd be horror environments. I mean, the horror industry would definitely benefit from being able to plop someone down into a completely different world and mess with their senses. But later on, I think that what we'll see more and more are sort of power fantasy simulations, ones that are as close to reality as can be, with perhaps exact replicas of entire cities, if not worlds. Only the player, the actual human being and not these advanced AI NPCs, is sort of the center of attention and adoration of everyone else. They're able to go through life with ease and efficiency and be validated in everything they do.
Mission begins in 10
Similarly, I think one thing we'll start to see are matrices based on political ideologies. People will be able to create their own sort of nations in a virtual world based on what they believe is best for the world, and not be limited by pesky factors like other people. So you'd have, I don't know, like a libertarian world where companies just so happen to actually work for the benefit of people even if there are no government regulations, or a communist world where no one is so greedy that they would try to own more of the means of production than anyone else and block others from being able to live a comfortable life and have access to resources. And of course, in both scenarios, resources are always going to be abundant. A matrix would be, with the exception of time and whatever limitations of computing and processing power there might be, as close to a true post-scarcity scenario as we could possibly get. But Additionally, I think what we might also find are in matrices and therefore activities that are simply impossible to do in reality. When you go skydiving, you kind of have to have a parachute unless you only intend to do it once and never again. But in a matrix, where you can even control how much pain you feel, how durable your body is, and so on and so forth, you could jump from the edge of the stratosphere and make it a competition to try to hit a tiny target in the middle of a city. Some people land close to it, some people will land far from it, but no one will turn into a splash of red mist like what would happen in real life. Similarly, like those FPSs I talked about earlier, like in TF2 you have people shooting each other, launching explosives at each other, burning each other, stabbing each other, and then they just come back after a few seconds. In the Matrix, you would be able to have both realistic and, similar to TF2, non-realistic combat scenarios, where pain would be heavily reduced, but there would be strict win-lose conditions and rules that everyone would have to abide by. So I might be able to pick up a minigun like the Heavy, but the Matrix itself would limit me to the general speed of the Heavy. Such a technology would easily be incredibly disruptive to the entertainment industry. And of course, we cannot forget the likely massive amounts of just sheer pornographic matrices that would exist. After all, Freud was right, and everyone else is just coping really hard. On. Give the NG a warning. Oh! Over here. Everyone else is just coping hard. Now, it's kind of a joke about the Star Trek holodeck that once it's made, there's going to be a bunch of pornographic scenarios and no one will ever want to leave. But the problem with that is that you're still a biological human being, just surrounded by hard light or whatever might actually make such a technology possible, if it even is. And for men, after they orgasm, they have a period of time where they have what's colloquially known as post-nut clarity, where they become disinterested in any erotic endeavors and want to focus on something else. In fact, they might even feel a little bit guilty about what they were just pleasuring themselves to. But that would not be a limitation in a matrix, where your body would be a virtual construct and your mind could be tricked into having any physical sensation you wish. So maybe after you finish, you immediately are ready again. No limitations, no stops, no brakes on this train. It's a kind of thing you don't hear talk about a lot with this subject, and yet it's probably going to be the biggest boon, because after all, when it comes to new technologies, they tend to be shitty, but they're almost always used for novelty and eroticism. Like, look at, what's the term? Deepfakes, that's it. There's some novelty with it, like the 15.ai website or something along that line, where you have the TF2 kind of soundbite thing where you can type in a word and the character would say it, or a sentence or whatever. Look up Spies Drawing on YouTube and you'll probably see some videos made with that technology. That's novelty. It's silly, it's goofy, it's not really going to change anything. At most, it might be incorporated into some source filmmaker projects, and that's about it. And there's also erotic deepfakes, people taking the images of celebrities and more skillfully using AI, putting them on bodies of people that aren't them. So it looks like they're sitting there in the nude or getting screwed or whatever. But eventually this technology is going to have much more serious ramifications. I actually feel a little bad about that. And it will become something to contend with, and like any technology, it'll be the start of great and terrible things. Now, right now, BCIs are incredibly limited. We can get people to sort of kind of type on a virtual keyboard and sort of kind of move arms around, but that's really it. You know, we're a far cry from the Matrix, despite what Gabe Newell might insist. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he has access to information I don't. In fact, he probably does, because he's a multi-billionaire, you know, captain of industry, and I'm just some jackass playing video games, talking in a mic, rambling for YouTube. Now, in addition to entertainment, a Matrix-level BCI would also interrupt the education industry, and I might actually be more excited for that than even the virtual sex paradise islands. And the reason for that is because I desire to know as much as possible, but I'm also just severely limited by virtue of being a human being without any exceptional mental qualities by just being human, and it sucks. And unless you have like a super advanced memory, you win the genetic lottery, most of what you read and learn is forgotten. You might remember the broad, the generic, and maybe a few quotes and tidbits here and there, but a lot of it just disappears. And so if it's possible to rapidly download, you know, advanced knowledge, intricate knowledge, savantcy in a myriad of subjects, I mean, I know what I would do. I'd make myself, like, you know, an expert at math. I'd learn a few languages. I'd love to learn how to play the piano, but I'm just too lazy and unmotivated to do so, so that would be nice. Learn a bunch of medical stuff. I think I basically described Dr. House. And the reason this would be so grand is because right now, education fucking sucks. Like, whether it's grade school or college, it fucking sucks. It seems to be specifically tailored to ruining any love of learning. Like, take mathematics, which the vast majority of people seem to struggle with in one way or another. You're either blessed by genetic RNG to be able to easily grasp it, or you're gonna hate it and struggle through it, if you are even able to struggle through it. You know, in the current education system, it's basically you have to sit down and listen to someone teach you the concepts and how to solve different equations, the sort of logic and step behind it, and you either grasp that or you don't. If you don't and you need more time, you're basically taking even more time to do something that you really don't want to do in the first place because you're struggling with it. And then you have to get tested on it, and you know, you could get half of it right and it's fuck you, you failed. You could get 60% of it right and it's fuck you, you failed. And unlike, say, a video game where, you know, let's say this match is going really poorly and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this, you know, this is tiring me, I don't like it. I could just leave right here now, take a breather, maybe get a bite to eat, go on a walk, whatever. Do anything else, play a different game. But you can't do that in the middle of a test or the middle of class. You're kind of stuck there. I guess the same thing applies to work as well. Oh. No idea where he went. Do a sweep, hero. But if you're able to just instantly download knowledge, if you're able to become savant in mathematics or chemistry or physics or music theory or the arts or, you know, anything you might struggle with, I mean, how much happier would you be? How much more complete of a person would you be having all this additional knowledge and being able to use it and understand it and apply it? I mean, that would just be downright utopic, in my opinion. And some people would probably take a dim view of that. Some people would probably argue with, let's say, learning how to do art, or compose and play music. Like, you know, the learning process is part of the fun. It adds meaning to it. And, you know, they are completely free to do things the long way. I strongly believe in freedom of choice when it comes to this sort of technology. It's one of the reasons why I think capitalism needs to either be abolished or changed so severely that's unrecognizable, because eventually it will lock people out of opportunities because they aren't willing to get these upgrades. I mean, how necessary is it to have an internet connection and a computer because of all the places you need to apply to when it comes to work online, rather than just seeing the manager and giving him a firm handshake and receiving tons of money to buy your first house like our parents had. But for me, the way I look at it is, you know, let's say I do decide to learn how to play the piano. What I have in mind when doing that, what I visualize myself doing, is playing with the level of finesse that people like Elton John does, or Beethoven, or, you know, whatever great pianist example you want to use. What I don't envision myself, what doesn't motivate me, is the thoughts of, you know, sitting down in front of all these keys and struggling to figure out, was that A minor, is that E major, you know, am I pressing this one right, in tune with this one? Learning very simple melodies and then struggling to work my way up to something more complicated. Because I'm fairly certain that I'm not a gifted savant in that instrument. I'm not just gonna sit down and be able to rapidly and efficiently learn how to use it. And I think that's what everyone ultimately has when they decide to pick up a new skill or hobby. When they learn how to draw, they're imagining, you know, drawing portraits in realistic proportions, or their own action-packed comic books, and having all these really awesome fight scenes with tons of motion and stuff, or animation, having a Disney quality, you know, quality stuff, they're not thinking about struggling with the very basics, with learning how to crawl before they even know how to walk and then run. Get over here. Oh, God damn it. Could have been a bit better, but oh well. Like, the thing is, you're either born with certain tendencies that lend you to be able to pick up new skills and talents more efficiently, or you do it the hard way, and there's no third option. And I think if we did have an option, we will see a lot less people cope with this. Oh, well, it's actually meaningful that you suck complete ass at something before you're good at it. Just like I think we'll see a lot of people stop coping about the meaninghood or the meaningness of death if we're able to live thousands and thousands of years. If not even longer. Now, such a scenario to me, like I said before, seems like it's a ways away, and it's probably best that radical life extension does end up being the first major transhumanist technology that reaches the public, because my goodness, would it suck to die the day before you can get a BCI matrix whatever. But unlike something like, say, flying cars or jetpacks or robotic butlers and stuff like that, like I said before, there are companies actually working on this, actually working with the goal of making this a reality and putting tons of money and resources and research into it. Whereas I'm pretty sure flying cars were entertained once in, let's say, Ford or BMW, and then they realized, oh, we're gonna have to develop a ton of new technology, logistics is gonna be a nightmare, we're not gonna get a very good return on our investment, and 4 wheels on the ground has satisfied people enough. It's better than the horse, at least. But still, like, the amount of, say, computing power it would take to simulate a realistic virtual environment, I think a lot of people underestimate. Like, let me put it this way, there are a myriad of things in my room right now that I could pick up and just throw around anywhere. And if I pick up, let's say this drink I have here, and chuck it at a bunch of empty bottles and cans behind me, it's going to cause them to topple over. Some of them still have a little bit of liquid inside of them that's going to spill. And in a Matrix, that would all have to be simulated. Get out of here, Scout. No one likes you. Or, I think a better example is, in a lot of stealth games and action games that for whatever reason the developers think need stealth segments, it's a pretty common tactic where you can pick up like a glass bottle and chuck it over there, and when it makes a sound, an NPC goes over and investigates. But in the game itself, as soon as a bottle hits the ground, it just disappears. In a Matrix, not only would it have to realistically shatter into larger and smaller pieces, but those pieces would have to remain there indefinitely unless interacted with. And if you do decide to pick up one, it would have to realistically interact with the environment. So like the full bottle, if I rub it up against my arm, it's not going to do anything because it's smooth glass. But if I pick up one of those shards and, cut into my arm, it's going to have to take on a completely different property and different interaction than it did as the unbroken glass bottle. And that's just something you don't see in video games, mainly because there's not really much of a point to it. You have to program the ability to have such an interaction, and it's just a lot of work for very little return. Now, perhaps one day, artificial intelligence out here will advance to the point where an AI could just develop an entire matrix itself, similar to, well, the actual Matrix, I guess, but maybe with less of using people as batteries. That we can do without that. There's better ways to get power anyways. Or, maybe BCIs would produce our own intelligence explosion like what's supposed to happen with AIs in a few decades. And we would be able to, just better and better figure out how to make this stuff, how to make the computing software and all that work. Wasn't paying attention to those stickies. Have a pretty good push here, though. I don't know, it seems like a really fascinating and very useful technology. And it's probably gonna be a major disruptor to a lot of the world as it is. I mean, if you give people this option right now to just go into a virtual world and have everything catered to you by an advanced AI, what entertainment industry is going to compete? Like, pretty much the entire vacation and travel industry might be severely disrupted because people just opt to go to these virtual environments. Who wants to pack their shit and sit on a plane and several hours fly over to, I don't know, Florida or some shit, and then get off, and the whole hassle of the airport, getting a car, a hotel, and then you get there and there's a bunch of other assholes who have the audacity to take up time and space in this universe. It might not even be fun, maybe they'll ruin it even further than just their existence. Or, they just boot themselves up in the Matrix and say, hey, give me a tropical resort, and you can set the beach to how you want. You can have like a, I don't know, big titty island girl serving you drinks, and you can say, hey, I want a beautiful sunset right here. Good, good. Alright, now stop the sun. This is a perfect view. And just sit down, relax, and look at the pretty sky for however many hours you want. Yeah, they're really gonna have to entice you to travel when that's a possibility, especially since it's going to be sensationally indistinguishable from reality. And I suppose in some ways that could seem like a bit of a dystopia. People sitting down in these virtual worlds, not having real experiences or whatever. But, we kind of already do that a bunch as it is. I mean, anyone who's played a sports game is having an imitation of the real sport. and a much shittier imitation than what my hypothetical Matrix resort would be. And who knows, perhaps being able to experience these wonderful virtual environments might compel people to demand the real world start being better as well. Or it could lessen their dependencies on multitudes of frivolous industries and, change the marketplace and all that crap. Yeah, it's really hard to predict the effects of such a radical technology. And we've seen already with stuff like the internet and especially social media, the kind of major effects it has had on just about everything. But I do think it will be for the best. Technology might be the start of great and terrible things, but we are better off in general having technology than not. And a lot of the problems that we face with technology aren't even strictly due to the tech itself, it's due to human greed and stupidity. But in any case, that was just kind of a subject I've had my mind on for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I decided to make a little video about it. Hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.